my grandfather worked for a royal family. No, not that royal family, I know what you're thinking, but there are others. But this royal family didn't pay some of their lower workers. And my grandfather paid them out of his paycheck. Now, this was just one of the values that shone through what my grandfather did. He was one of the first black men in our village, and he brought our family over to the UK in 1984. So we have always kind of existed in a state of uncomfortability. But one thing that I always remember of my grandfather is that he is the inspiration and the core of everything that I do. And he passed that on to my mother, who continues to drive me and create an amazing environment for me to thrive. One of the biggest things for my grandfather was that he was an incredibly kind man. And I always tried to show my kindness at the same level as what he did. Now, the second thing is that we are all human beings first. No matter who we are or how we choose to live our lives, we are all human beings. Now, my grandfather was a leader. He was the leader of our family, and he managed a hospital, he was a diplomat. My mother, on the other hand, was an accountant, she did a maths degree, and although I wouldn't say that she volunteered herself to leading, what I would say is that she has immaculate principles that I try to carry through my life. She motivates me to do that. Now, I haven't really always been a massively extroverted person, and I know you're probably going to laugh to yourself right now, because the stories that I'm going to tell you, and probably what you can see of me right now, is that I'm not introverted at all, but I actually am. So hear me out. Now, my first transformational moment for me in my life was one in college. I got the opportunity to go to France and speak at the European Parliament. Now, in this opportunity, I got voted to sit in the presidential booth and represent an argument about refugees. Now, I remember sitting in the booth, my hands were shaking, and I was absolutely terrified. I was looking out at hundreds of people, all staring at me, waiting for me to open my mouth. This was my biggest state of uncomfortability that I remember, but it was also the day that I realised that I'm actually pretty good at public speaking and I'm pretty good at educating. Now, I decided to take those skills and go and do a degree at University of Sociology, and halfway through my degree, I decided that I wanted to use my skills to create positive change. So what I did is I created a Facebook group, and it was named after my local area. It is now expanded to help more people, but I remember hundreds of people joining overnight. And my first really uncomfortable thing was having to remove people from that environment because they didn't want to be educated. Now, I had to sacrifice a lot of myself to be able to make the environment inclusive. But one thing I always think about is that I am a disabled African Muslim woman. My life was never comfortable. I have always operated in a state of uncomfortability. However, I do have a lot of privilege, and so I want to be able to use my privilege to help others, and sometimes you have to make those sacrifices and be uncomfortable to make positive change. Now, since then, my organisation has helped lots of people in lots of different ways, and I am now working with big organisations such as the police, the council, the BBC, and so I then wanted to make sure that I was carrying this with me wherever I went. After I graduated university, I went straight into a graduate scheme in a company called Mars. Now, you may just know it for the chocolate. I also kind of just went for the chocolate, but turns out it was a lot more than that. In my first year, I joined our associate resource groups. Now, I kind of felt a little bit of imposter syndrome because I was just a graduate who had come into this huge corporate environment, but I knew that I had skills and that I could put them in place to create these inclusive environments and educate others and make the world a better place. And so I'd forced myself to be a bit uncomfortable, put myself forward, and now, a year and a few months later, I'm leading the education pillar for our Race, Ethnicity and Cultural Heritage ARG, I'm co-leading our Diversibility ARG, and I am the Inclusion and Diversity representative for the graduate scheme. So I had to push myself way out of my comfort zone in a very different environment to be able to create the positive change. Now I have a fully up and running training program for senior leaders in the company. The second year, in my second placement, which I've just started a few months ago, I got the really amazing opportunity to be in learning and development and to create a social learning community. I had to think a lot about this because creating a community from scratch when you're outside of a corporate environment is very different. I had control over everything. I was my own boss, essentially. Whereas in a big global corporation, you are interacting with people that you work with on a daily basis. Uncomfortability is a lot more stressful, basically. But I knew that I got energy from creating equitable environments. And this means sometimes you have to give people a bit more of a boost. And someone very important to me at Mars, Mariama, she once said to me that once you climb the ladder, you have to leave it down there for someone else. So when she was finished with the microphone, she passed it on to me, advocated for me, and gave me the step up to have a lot of these opportunities. So I know that I want to keep carrying that on. I want to make sure that other people's voices are heard, even if I have to sacrifice a bit of myself for that. So throughout all of this, I am carrying through the values, morals, and principles that my grandfather and mother have always taught me. And that is to always be kind, and that human beings always come first. Now, I've also then created positive change within Mars because I've educated a lot of people on inclusivity in different pillars, and I've also made people feel a bit more comfortable to have those conversations. Now, I'm not saying that it is comfortable to have those conversations because it never is, but it's really important that we recognize the position of privilege that we operate from because some people have no choice but to be uncomfortable. So sometimes we have to force ourselves into that uncomfortability to create the positive change. Now, we could probably just coast by in our communities. We could probably lead our communities in a pretty non-inclusive way. But if you want to make positive change, you really have to ensure that inclusivity is at the heart of everything that you do. And when you are looking at things as human being first, that means that you push yourself out of your comfort zone and you do what's right. And now I look around and I see people in my local area who are now more comfortable to wear their natural hair out, or their child is no longer struggling at school, or their issue with the council is resolved. And I can confidently know that even though it was a really difficult time for me and it was really uncomfortable for me, I changed that person's life, just like my granddad and my mum changed mine.